Hey guys, Drifter here. Today I want to talk about Battlefield 6 and how it could quite literally revive military shooters just by being a good game and bringing that fan base back into the fold of FPS gaming. I personally haven't seen this much interest in a military shooter in at least a decade. The amount of hype was surprisingly high for me because I had assumed that military or milsim shooters were a dying genre. To take a look at the history of them, Call of Duty jumped the shark years ago and hasn't been a military shooter since at least Modern Warfare 3, the old one. The Call of Duty fan base has truly burned out on increasing wackiness in the game, which we will certainly talk about in today's video. And not to be outdone, EA, DICE, and Battlefield have time traveled to World War I. I feel a little guilty putting that on here, even though it was very silly. I love Battlefield 1, where they went back to World War II, the future, and they even did urban warfare cops and robbers with Battlefield Hardline, which was not my favorite thing. These types of experiences can be fun, but they ultimately aren't realistic, nor are they aimed at the same kind of crowd that would play something like Battlefield 4. There's other games out there like Arma and Insurgency, which are great games, and they're doing decent in their own way, but they're still kind of niche tactical games that didn't quite catch the broader gaming zeitgeist. Delta Force was trying to keep it real, but they're getting a little bit lost in the wackiness of their gadgets and operators these days. Again, not a bad game, but realism isn't there. Medal of Honor as well. Oof, we don't talk about Medal of Honor anymore. Counter-Strike is far from dead. It's very successful, but it did lose out on a lot of its player base to Valorant in terms of popularity, and it's not exactly a milsim game in terms of gameplay mechanics. We do have Rainbow Six Siege, which is doing really well and maintains some degree of realism in their game, but they also jumped the shark a bit with Rick and Morty skins, and the gadgets and sort of metagaming has evolved to the point where Rainbow Six Siege feels like its own unique kind of game. Now, we do have Tarkov still holding it down appropriately, but the game is so hardcore that once again, it can never capture a casual audience. So I think it's safe to say that the state of the entire military shooter gaming genre is not doing so well. There may be plenty of offerings out there, and there are plenty of gamers playing them, but few are truly satisfied, and I think I'm one of those people. I think I actually completely burned out on this genre without even realizing it. Over the last few decades, I've experienced so many bad military shooters in a row that I think I genuinely gave up and moved on to playing more cartoony games like The Finals, Fortnite, and League of Legends. Even before that, I was cheating on my main squeeze the military shooter genre by playing Overwatch, and it seemed like every game development studio on the planet was jealous of Overwatch's success and hard pivoted over into being a hero shooter. Honestly, tons of game developing studios over a decade later are still trying to make hero shooters reminiscent of Overwatch. Cough, Concord, cough. I think Overwatch is a great game, and I love hero shooters, but they don't quite appeal to the same crowd as a military shooters. These games just don't scratch that same itch that we all have for a pseudo-realistic experience, even if they're really well-designed games. Which leads me to the main point of this video, that due to my own burnout, I criticized the Battlefield 6 beta a lot more than most people, and I didn't have as much fun with it as most people did. If you go back and watch my videos, you'll notice a distinct lack of hype and a general disdain for being back in the realism space. It occurred to me much later, mostly due to reading YouTube comments that strongly disagreed with me, that I was projecting my own issues with the genre of military shooters onto Battlefield 6 just because it was in the same genre. I was sort of taking out my frustrations on that game because my hopes and expectations for that genre have been absolutely rock bottom for so long, and I've been let down over and over again down to the floor, and then we had to dig through the basement and then sub-basement to let me down so many times over. I was just grumping about another military shooter. There's some degree of practicality to this stance, though, as I have been experiencing mostly brown, dusty, Middle Eastern sandbox-style shooters ever since 9/11. It's really been about 25 years of that being the most common FPS experience for gaming, and no shortage of film and other media to fill in as well. It's for good reasons, of course, because art reflects life and life reflects art, and the media that we enjoy does reflect our reality, and especially our fears and concerns about what's going on at the time in that reality. So over the last 20 plus years of the war on terror, it makes total sense that there would be a lot of media that would have that theme. But with the passage of time and the experience of what we will call lackluster shooters in that genre have very much so burned me out. A lot of the criticism that I gave to Battlefield 6 really should have been criticism for the state of military shooters in general, and again, I think I was quite literally projecting to something that wasn't even there. That being said, with a little bit of retrospective, I think that Battlefield 6 could actually revitalize the entire genre of military shooters in gaming, and if it does, I also hope it's able to revitalize my personal interest in that genre as well. So on to some of the things that I think Battlefield 6 will do well right off the rip is they will probably have a return to grounded aesthetics, and from the talks of the developers, it seems like it's going to stay grounded. This is a tough one to get right, because no video game can ever properly simulate a real war. Even extremely realistic video games like Arma and Insurgency are just approximations that you can play from the comfort of your own home without heat, sand, starvation, or the ever-present fear that you might just not exist in a few moments. So most game developers approach this with the goal of making something that feels kind of like warfare. COD 4 is the perfect example of this, and it's great to talk about here because the same team working on Battlefield 6 made COD 4. Call of Duty 4 is not realistic at all, to be clear, but it did have a real war kind of vibe to it, and Battlefield 6 is probably closer to this vibe than any game that I've played in a very long time. No, Battlefield 6 is not like a real war. In a real war, there are no magic healing bags that make you feel good, but the way the game plays and the visuals, they all come together in this nice mix to tickle your brain and give just the right sensation that you've been through a battle. That sensation is a very cathartic experience for a lot of people, and not just veterans looking for some tension relief. I think that DICE has very wisely decided to focus on these vibes instead of vibes of overall realism or wackiness, and one thing that they've been fairly clear about is they intend to try to keep it this way. It's nearly impossible to make a video on this topic without criticizing Call of Duty here, so here goes. Call of Duty has jumped the shark and no longer has the vibe of a real war or any type of military combat experience. This is especially true for the DLC cycle of Call of Duty games as they go onward. The Call of Duty games that come out, and honestly other genres too, tend to start out with fairly realistic looking operators that are very hype in a tactical kind of way. And then you'll get some kind of edgy operators, some kind of wackier things that you wouldn't see too often in real life. Then you'll probably get a crossover from a movie or something. And then by the time the season's done, it's full cartoon mode where you play as Roger from American Dad in a mech. I'm picking on Call of Duty in this video because it's the easy example to make, but there's a ton of other pseudo-realistic games that do this as well. They'll launch with a grounded aesthetic and a season pass, and they end up looking very silly and everybody running around in anime outfits a year or two later. That's a vibe that I actually kind of love, which is why I initially didn't criticize it in Call of Duty for so long. I am totally down for that. I enjoy the Overwatch vibe. I enjoy playing the finals so much, it's incredible, and one of the skins I'm going to be picking up next is the Maid Catgirl. Meow! But that's an aesthetic that fits the game that it's in, and Maid Catgirls running around on a realistic battlefield in, I don't know, Northern Europe somewhere in Battlefield 6 wouldn't really fit into that game. It would take you out of that immersion. So as long as Battlefield 6 can keep the content creep from getting too silly, I think it'll be fine. I think they'll do much better focusing on actual cool real-life operator stuff instead of just sort of crazy wild crossover skins. In a similar vein, I think that Battlefield 6's campaign should have a story and theme that is meant to be taken seriously, which is pretty much the same thing I discussed before, but applied to the story. I think a really strong single-player campaign would be amazing for Battlefield 6, because as iconic as military shooters are in the multiplayer space, their most memorable and mimetic moments that truly get out into the broader collective consciousness of gamers frequently come from the campaigns. And I think it's totally fine to go a little bit silly with the story, maybe like Bad Company, but not go totally overboard. every good story has different beats. They have dramatic beats where it's a lot of tension and then a little comedy for tension relief, and then building tension and then relief. It's just the general structure of stories. Wild moments and humor are always appreciated, but they have to be balanced with more serious and dramatic aspects of the experience as well. I actually have pretty high hopes that Battlefield 6 will do a good job on this one. That's not something I am particularly concerned about. I am looking forward to Battlefield 6's new gameplay mechanics that elevate the franchise and feel rewarding to the player. They're kind of already doing a great job of this. Off the top of my head, Battlefield 6 has one of the best destruction systems in gaming, second best compared to the finals, but still second best is fantastic, and that immediately elevates its level of realism and fun because most FPS games don't bother with level destruction, or if they do, it's a very simple type of destruction. Being able to destroy your map and interact with it and change it with your weapons makes the game at least a dozen times more immersive. I also appreciate the drag to revive mechanic because that's much more like real life instead of just standing in the middle of an open battlefield giving somebody a steroid shot. The gunplay mechanics have some controversial things like bloom in them, but even things like bloom are meant to simulate the nuanced movements of real life. As a person who has used about half of the weapons that will be available in Battlefield 6 in real life, I can promise you that if you're trying to run sideways while shooting an assault rifle fully automatic, those bullets are not going to go perfectly in line with whatever your holographic sight looks at. To tell you guys the truth, I'm not even trained to do the moving and shooting John Wick style or like SWAT team type of stuff. I'm like a very casual guy who just goes to the range and sits still. If I'm not standing still, if I'm trying to walk and shoot, I can't hit the broadside of a barn. So I don't really expect to be able to do that in Battlefield, and I think that carries over to the movement system which they intend to nerf. In the beta, it didn't take very long for streamers to discover some what we'll call movement mechanics that allowed them to do a lot of incredible things and kind of slide and fly around the map and move like an absolute demon maniac, which you can't do in real life. I promise you, if you try to knee slide in the sand, you're not going to slide 20 feet and then hop up and bunny hop and spin around and slide backwards on your knees. Just life doesn't work like that. So slowing that down is going to be good, and they've also added a few other little things like being able to zero your sights and a couple of other little immersive features, which I think will be fun. But that does bring me to the final topic of today's video, and the one that I'm most excited about, which I saved it for the end, is meaningful gameplay changes in Battle Royale. Not realism, not immersion, not this aesthetic stuff, but actual like real hard gameplay changes has me really pumped. From what little info I've seen, either leaked or officially announced, as of the time of recording this video, I'm a very sick man, my production times are really slow, but what I've seen is that the Battle Royale experience is looking very solid with two major changes that I think every Battle Royale game should have. First up, the zone is supposedly a wall of fire, much like Firestorm in Battlefield 5, and on top of that, it's an insta-kill wall. If that thing touches you, you are toast, and I really like this because one of the major complaints that I have about most Battle Royale games that come out is that they are not designed for the zone to be a serious problem. There's nothing that twists my panties in a wad like getting shot from inside the zone by some guy who's just hoarding meds. I remember the wall of fire in Firestorm that would literally cook you very quickly and would distress your character to the point that it was nearly impossible to see or shoot out of the fire. You didn't instantly die in that zone, but it was brutal to be in there. And there's something that I respected about that game and pretty much any other game that has a similarly lethal zone. I think Battle Royale games play best when people take the zones seriously and when the zones move relatively quickly to squeeze people together. So hearing the zone is going to be lethal in Battlefield 6 was just music to my ears. I also appreciate that it appears to be that destruction is coming to Battle Royale. Not only that, but it has been touted as being destruction everywhere or an extremely destructible Battle Royale map. The only game that I can think of offhand that does this properly right now is Fortnite. And once again, cartoon game, wonderfully designed, doesn't necessarily appeal to the same crowd. That's probably the #1 Battle Royale game on the planet though, so they have to be doing something right. And the thing I think they're doing right by having a destructible environment is making it harder to camp. I really hate campers in Battle Royale, so having the option to level a building is always good. I've talked about this in the past. I don't think Battle Royale games should all be like Apex, where you push and slide and shoot and slay or whatever. There needs to be a variety of options available, but unfortunately there are some players in a Battle Royale game, and I'm really thinking about PUBG here, where they will identify a building that cannot be destroyed and you can't really throw grenades into, and they're just going to prone out at the top of the stairs and wait for you to walk up, so there's not much that you can do about it. There's little goblins here. I like having options to deal with goblins. I like having alternatives. If they're going to camp and hold a power position, I would like there to be some kind of ability for me to counter that. I'm pretty excited for the prospect of just flattening some apartment campers in Battlefield 6 Battle Royale. So I've spent most of this video talking about Battlefield 6 revitalizing military shooters, but I'm probably most excited at the prospect of it actually revitalizing Battle Royale with some significant gameplay changes. So yeah, at the end of the day, I've definitely been a grump about Battlefield 6 and really haven't been on the hype train at all. I think that a huge part of that is because I burned out on military shooters without even realizing it, and I'm not sure if it's a time thing because I've been doing this for so long, or if it's more realistically because no games in that genre have really scratched my itch in a very long time, but I am looking forward to Battlefield 6, so I'll see you on the battlefield. Drifter out.